Tonight on our Zoom meeting, we have Annie Linton. She is a clinical exercise physiologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She also teaches at Eastern University, and she's going to talk a little bit about about what it's like being in the world of exercise physiology and what it took her to get to where she is today. Annie, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Let's see. I have currently worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia off and on for about 30 years, which is a long time. My undergrad was actually as an art major at Kutztown State College, and then I changed into recreation therapy. So I worked in that for a little bit, and then I decided to go back to Temple University for a master's in clinical exercise physiology. Actually, Dr. Dan Moser was one of my teaching assistants, and he taught lab. And so I've known him for quite some time. My first job that I got right out of college, right out of Temple University, I took was working in cardiac rehabilitation down at Kent General Hospital, which was down in Dover, Delaware, under Mike Conway, who is either still working or he could be up at Sacred Heart, I believe, up in Allentown area. He's a director of cardiac rehab up there. If anybody's looking for an internship, you might want to check with him. I learned a lot about adult cardiac rehabilitation, adult cardiology. We worked on the floor with phase 1, 2, and 3 patients. My job primarily at that time was working with patients who had undergone bypass surgeries and or cardiac, any types of cardiac surgery. And my job was to just do some basic conditioning with them. After I left that, I worked with a private program in cardiac rehabilitation, but it was more of a fitness center that was situated in Philadelphia, which is no longer an entity. I then kind of went into, it was a little tough finding a job in exercise science, just because the field was starting to become a little more saturated. As you all probably know right now, it's a little more challenging to find some positions available. But I started working in medical sales, and then I saw this job opening for Children's Hospital Philadelphia along 1990, long before you guys were even thought of. And I pursued it and pursued it and pursued it, and I finally got the job. And my job was to work as a clinical exercise physiologist with pediatrics. Now, pediatrics is often not taught in regular curriculum in undergrads, and so it was kind of new to me. I never really knew what pediatric clinical exercise physiology was, and I really didn't understand the idea of congenital heart disease at all. So it was very informational. It was a huge on-the-job training learning experience for me. So after being in this field for over 30 years, there's certainly, every day is a new challenge because there's no clinical experience, or that every clinical experience is very different from one to the next. There's no textbook child that comes out through our doors that you can say that one child is going to be the same exact as the next. And the joy that I find coming to work every day, working with children, for me, has been a blessing. Some people say, I don't know how you work with kids, but I have enjoyed every minute of it. I often say, I don't know how people, could work with anybody else except kids, because it's just such a great opportunity. So as far as my degree in clinical exercise physiology at Temple, most of my training, I feel personally, was uh, on the job and learning. I did work at Children's Hospital for 8 years, uh, became the supervisor of the lab just out of default because everybody left. And then I became the supervisor. And actually, the only person to supervise was myself because I was just like a one-man show, one woman show at the exercise lab. Uh, but we grew and grew and grew with that lab. And then I left. I went down to AI DuPont Hospital, worked at Nemours, opened up a lab down there, worked there for 8 years. Um, I was getting married, took a break, had some children along the way. And then I came back to Children's Hospital about 10 years ago, and I've been there ever since. I am more of a three-quarter time position where I am a lab technician, not a supervisor, but that works just fine for me because of I like being more hands-on with the patients. I also spend a lot of time working closely with the interns. I enjoy working and teaching the interns what we do. Um, and with that, our exercise testing starts with someone being referred to cardiology for whatever reason. Maybe they are symptomatic with chest pain, shortness of breath, palpitations. Maybe they uh, felt dizzy during exercise or when they were running or playing soccer or, fighting with their sister. And they will get referred to cardiology. Cardiology will see them as a patient and then recommend a variety of different tests like an EKG, often an echocardiogram, and sometimes, or most of the times, with a exercise test. So in our exercise lab, we are one of the busiest exercise labs in the country. We see upwards of 2,000 patients a year, where most other labs will see probably a quarter of that at most. And we have a state-of-the-art equipment in our lab. We also have two facilities, and they're actually planning on building one in Abington as well as one in New Jersey. So there may be opportunities for you guys, but I can't say for sure when and if, and obviously COVID has put a wrench in a lot of the plans to move forward with these facilities. However, going back to the patient, every test that we do are primarily maximal exercise tests. Not every child in our lab is a child. We see kids from ages 2 to 65, and they can be seen in the adult congenital heart clinic, primarily because these 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds who were born with heart disease, pediatric cardiologists know their hearts the best. There's a definitely different dichotomy of knowledge base where an adult cardiologist versus a pediatric cardiologist. So it is, we do a lot of research in our lab. We do a tremendous amount of testing with pulmonology. So we work with kids with asthma. We do exercise-induced asthma protocols with a lot of our patients. We see kids, again, symptomatic, kids who have also vascular issues, high blood pressure, hypertension, metabolic issues. There's patients with, sometimes we do kids who have Friedreich ataxia, which is more of a neurological muscular dystrophy type of issue, or I should say disease. So there's a wide variety of patients that we see. We don't just see the patient that has acquired heart disease. We work with other departments as nuclear medicine. On occasion, we work with pulmonology, as I said, and our lab is pretty versatile in how we are work with other patients. We do occasional rehab for patients, but because we have kids coming in from all over the world and from all over the country, it's not easy to set up weekly conditioning programs for these kids because a lot of them come from very far distances to work to be seen in our department, cardiology department. We have world-class open heart surgery, cardiothoracic surgeons that work with us, and we just acquired a couple new ones this year, and some of our staff is changing, so it's going to be exciting to see how the division of cardiology progresses. Okay.
Just going back to the part that you were talking about having like kids with rehab come in, have you worked with cardiac and pulmonary rehab patients now or in the past before? And if you have, what's that like?
So are you talking mostly with at CHOP or in general since I became an exercise physiologist?
I mean, you've had so much experience, so you can just really talk just out of experience, not CHOP specifically, unless you want to throw in a specific case.
Okay. So currently we're working with a doctor, I won't say, at CHOP who is doing, we're working with kids who have had uh, hyperplast left heart syndrome, which is a underdevelopment of the left ventricle. And they've had it repaired as infants. And what what we find is that a lot of these kids, as they get older, the repair's fine. They can do pretty well in life if they continue to stay in shape. And where the focus is right now is, does lower extremity exercise, intense lower extremity exercise 3 times a week over the course of, I think it's 12 weeks, increase their oxygen consumption level that we're looking for, VO2 max. This is one in particular, one of the conditioning programs that we're doing. I'm currently working with the patient, but I did work with at least 3 of them this year. And there we do a lot of training. It's a 1-hour training session in the beginning, and then because of COVID, we've been doing it virtually. And we've also learned that this is a great experience. Is like instead of these patients having to always come down into the city, come into Philadelphia, find parking and all that, we can do training right on, face to face on Zoom. So we've had used Zoom sessions in that capacity. In answer to the question of whether or not does intense lower extremity exercise improve cardiovascular fitness in these kids, and the answer would be yes. Not everybody, but I'd say that we're seeing very good results with conditioning with a lot of these patients.
I think you said in the beginning, clinical exercise physiology is generally taught, but, pediatrics isn't really taught, when you're going to school. Would you have any advice for, upcoming like seniors wanting to go in exercise physiology that want to work in pediatrics? Is there certain things they can do to, expand their knowledge while they're learning and to better help them once they graduate and get out of college?
Well, yes. One is come to my class at Eastern because I'm putting it into my curriculum. So, and I've done that when I worked at Cabrini, and my hope is that someday there's more information available to college students in the field of exercise science about pediatrics. I would suggest that, and it's interesting, the way I did it was I came across an article. I was working in adult cardiac rehab, and I came across an article that mentioned pediatric cardiac rehab, and I thought, wow, that's so cool. And I wrote to the person and who wrote the article, and I said, I'm really interested in this, and how do I find out more? And she got back to me, and and it was just, that's what changed my life. That one article that came across my path. I would suggest that if you have an opportunity, if you really want to work with kids, if you have an opportunity to get a clinical internship, unfortunately in the Philadelphia area, we've got 3 facilities. We've got Children's Hospital Philadelphia, we have St. Chris's, and we have AI DuPont. Actually, it's called Nemours. And whether or not they do, I don't know St. Chris's or Nemours internship protocols. So, but any pediatric hospital across the country most likely has a exercise testing site. Most of them do. So I would suggest that if that's something that anybody is interested in, you're definitely going to learn a whole lot in a short period of time, about things that you've probably never heard of until you got to that internship. So, I mean, Lindsay, did you know much about pediatric cardiology until you came to work with us?
Absolutely not. I learned so much while I was there, so much more
Right.
than I ever thought I would during my, I think, 3-4 months while I was there.
Right. So, I mean, it's really, really interesting. And I just say, do your research, try to find what you can. And, there's, depending on where, I mean, everybody's from all across the country at Temple. So if any of your co-students or your other students that are in this program are interested, they should look into their hometown or wherever. We do have some connections across the country of other facilities that, you can certainly reach out. I'd be happy to help you if I can. There's also a program called NASPM, which is the North American Society of Pediatric Exercise Medicine. And that is it's a small group. When I was younger, about 20 years ago, it was really an exciting part of my life. I traveled a lot, and I, was actually even before that, I, was before I had children and marriage and all that stuff, I was traveling, and every 4 years, every other year, they have a meeting in the United States. Only once did I go outside the United States. So there are, those are really great, what do I say, symposiums, I should call them, because they're not super huge, but they're interesting enough. And they have people from all around the world that share the same interests in pediatric exercise medicine. So it's called the North American Society of Pediatric Exercise Medicine. I don't know who's the president this year, but Dr. Mike McBride was a previous president about, I don't know, 4 years ago. So they have new presidents every 2 years. So that would definitely be a way to get in touch. But certainly they could give us a holler. And as I said, I enjoy speaking with students, so I'd be happy to help anybody who has an interest in finding out more about pediatric exercise medicine.
That's awesome. We appreciate that recommendation. I just had some questions about how has the coronavirus pandemic changed how you guys function as a whole at your facility at CHOP, and how has that internship kind of changed the dynamic of helping other students develop?
So the coronavirus took everybody by surprise, obviously. I was skiing in Vermont when I was told not to come back to work until further notice. And it was quite scary because nobody knew what it was. We didn't know, but we just knew that our lab was pretty much shut down for let's see, March, April, May. The end of May, middle of June was when we started coming back on any regular basis. And in the meantime, we had all done extra jobs around the hospital. We were doing, I was gardening for CHOP. So I was like, or I was like security or doing, I was doing some COVID tracing and, whatever you could do to find work. But they did a great job by keeping staff employed on the payroll till the end of June. So there was this less fear of us losing our positions, which is one component of it, because that was important, the people working at that hospital. It was scary, but at the same time, when we all started coming back little by little, there's still a lot of people that are still working from home. The non-essentials, they're not non-essentials, they just don't need to be on location. Are still working from home, many of them. But because we are a hands-on department, EKGs, echoes, exercise, Holter monitors, you can't, do that virtual. So we are back full force. Everybody is required. We do not wear constant PPE. Our lab, all of our patients in particular are, they have to have COVID testing within 72 hours prior to seeing us. In fact, we had to turn someone away today because they did not get their results in time. So it's unfortunate, but we have a pretty strict policy that the jury is still out whether or not there's true aerosolization during a maximal exercise test and how long it stays in the air and whatever. But we do have restrictions, but most patients are complying with the 72-hour window of COVID testing. So we really haven't seen our numbers drop that bad, and we're pretty much back up to normal numbers. As far as our interns, we have not had any interns, although we have one right now. He was supposed to do his internship in the in the summer. And then we pushed him back till just now. He just started about a week ago. So, and he had to be completely COVID tested free. And, so we are working to get our interns back in and make sure that everybody, during the day, everybody's masked. And for sure, if there's someone up on the floor that, there's possibility that they've been exposed, we all wear PPE, and we're making sure that we're gowned, gloved, and whatnot. So we are taking precautions.
Okay.
I think we actually do have one of our peers is actually, I believe she's interning there next semester.
What's her name? I forget. Are you allowed to say, or?
I don't think she'd mind. Juliana?
Yeah, I think I've seen her name come across.
She should be with you guys come spring, I believe.
Okay, great. I can't say that we're going to be COVID free, so most likely not. So most likely she'll have to be wearing a mask all day long. And, it's different. We're sitting there. I'm so used to a mask, I don't even know that, it's on. Like, only when it fogs up my glasses, that's it, So, but everybody we're just all wearing masks. We're all, it is what it is, and it's just the new normal. So we all look like the doctors from Grey's Anatomy, when everybody's just talking anyway. So.
I mean, go ahead, Sam.
I have a question. If nobody.
Yes.
So Annie, what's a really important key factor that you consider, right, when you're prescribing individuals with, exercise advice or even exercise programming?
One of the biggest key factors is one, depending their age, are they able to be self-motivated, or do they need a little bit hand-holding? If they're self-motivated and they have good support system at home, can they do exercise at home? Can they, because a lot of individuals may not be in the best situation where they have either room in their house, or they might have a very busy household. They may not have the money to join a gym. It's easy to say, well, and that's one of my biggest things is like, we can sit there and do a maximal exercise test on someone and say, well, it looks like, everything checks out, but you're just deconditioned. Bye. So we don't always, I think sometimes our lab can be a little inefficient in letting people know, well, what's the next step? Because some parents will, some people are lucky. They have parents who are active and they'll get their kids active. But there's many people who fall into this area or gray area where, they really could benefit from conditioning and exercise, but they just don't know how to get started. And that's the challenge, because especially if they're coming from a distance, like, how do we monitor that? How do we do that? How do we get that person to the next step if all we did was the testing or the assessment? Ideally, I have to say, I believe we are working towards that step right now, is having consultations after the exercise test and say, especially if their doctors have recommended that it's okay for them to exercise. Not everybody that comes in for an exercise test is cleared, because we may have found something that didn't go well. Like, because we are doing a full-blown 12-lead EKG, blood pressure, pulse oximetry, metabolic assessment, we might find something that we weren't expecting to find during these exercise tests. So when these kids are done their test and we can say, wow, that was a great test, you're really in good shape, maybe doing a better job of explaining what that means and how they can, benefit from continued exercise. What the best one is, I always say, what's the best exercise for someone? One they're going to do. One they're going to participate in. If you could give them everything they could possibly want in front of them, but if they don't pick up that jump rope, or they don't go for a walk outside, there's it's really a motivational factor sometimes, and depending on the support that they have either at home or at school, is really, I think, the key to the answer. And I don't have a great answer for that, Sam. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It actually kind of leads me into like my next question. That I was kind of thinking about. So I had a previous class right before this, right? That's relating to the major. And in the class, right, there was a quote from Thomas Edison, and it says, "Doctors of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his or her patients in the care of human frame and diet, and in the cause of prevention of diseases." I can read that one more time if you guys didn't hear me.
Go ahead, try it again.
All right, it says, "The doctors of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his or her patient in the care of human frame and diet, and in the cause and prevention of diseases." So when it comes to like, you guys do like test somebody, right? You guys do find something like, is wrong with him, or say you guys don't find something wrong with him, but you guys think he's like unconditioned, right? And you guys refer him to a consultant or somebody to counsel, right? Do you guys primarily, just recommend them to like general counselors in the hospital, or do you guys recommend them to like actually like exercise professionals that will really get them in shape and get them going along the right lines?
Okay, that's a good question. First of all, exercise is the best medicine, as they say, next to laughter. But if everybody exercised just a little bit, I can guarantee you that we would have half the problems, physical problems in this world. So what Edison said was, what I'm getting from that is basically, you know, rather than give you a pill or a prescription of a pill, you know, if good diet, good healthy diet, healthy lifestyle, healthy, you know, exercise, that could solve a lot of your problems. We don't have counselors, although I take that back. We do have, right now, one of my coworkers, Shannon, is working with, it's called the CRVA program. These are kids that are kind of weight management individuals that are presenting with hypertension, high blood pressure. Some of them we see in the exercise lab. So when they're done their exercise tests, we're currently trying this new protocol of someone like Shannon, who sits right next to me. You know Shannon, right, Lindsay? So she is in charge of doing the exercise piece to it. So in that sense, we're trying to move from just doing testing to saying, okay, we're not only going to test you from an exercise standpoint, we're going to counsel you from an exercise standpoint. We're also going to add a nutritionist. We're going to add a cardiologist and possibly a psychologist. So can every facility do that? No, and this is just a brand new thing that we're trying to do. Ideally, there are some other facilities out there. Our healthy weight management program down at CHOP too, which is somewhat affiliated with our program, does a similar thing where it's a multi tasked program where the person who is being seen and presents with some concerns cardiovascularly, they are then counseled by a multidisciplinary team, like a nutritionist, dietitian, nutritionist, exercise physiologist, but that's far and few between. A lot of times, right after, there are some times where I will tell the patient after they're done exercising, if you have an interest in knowing more about a program, here's our number, please call back. Like, you kind of have to put it in their lap a little bit. But there's certainly people that if they really show that they're in dire need, or their cardiologist suggests that they really need a program, a lot of times the cardiologist will reach out to us exercise physiologists in the lab to help put together a plan for them for home. Okay. And there's a lot of times I've reached out to like local YMCAs and let them know this particular patient is coming in to see you, and you know, here's a heart rate range that we would like you to keep them at, and here's some ideas for how to condition them. But you know, that's something we really should be doing more of, but probably not enough of right now.
If I can just add on to that, I mean, just coming from Sam's question he asked and then what your response was, I feel like what you're saying is you guys are trying to implement a whole team, you know, for someone that comes in, instead of just, Sam was saying, like a counselor, or, you know, just like they go to see one person to help them exercise. They now have an entire team, which I think is so amazing. And I think that's so great that you guys are implementing this. And I feel like that should be implemented more and more often to help these kids that come in with these, you know, underlying conditions that are very serious. Because, you know, so you can't just leave it up to one person all the time. You might need different perspectives from different fields.
Right, right. And it's just, you know, counseling also can be, you know, having different people coming from different perspectives, I think is helpful as well. So I think, like I said, I think we hopefully are on that trajectory to do that more than we have in the past. And my hope is that, you know, there'll be a variety of different ways to do it, even more so with community outreach in our satellite, those upcoming satellite places that are going to be opening in Abington and New Jersey as well.
So what kind of limitations has insurance companies put on you guys that you wish you could help your patients progress forward with their programs and just get them to better health? Or how about this? Have you felt that insurance companies have given you guys a lot of restrictions in terms of what you guys could have done for your patients, or no?
You know, what's funny is that I don't know how much the enterprise has looked into community programming for our patients. Our exercise test generally is covered by insurances, the testing itself. So, and certainly we've had patients that parents cancel their test because they found out they have to do it out of pocket, and out of pocket expense for an exercise test. You know, if they have to say, well, exercise, or, you know, I'll just stick with just the echocardiogram or the EKG. An exercise test is kind of like, I wouldn't say the gravy, but it's kind of like that additional test that's, in our opinion, is very helpful, but not always the focus of a lot of cardiologists. So not every cardiologist sends us patients for an exercise test. So typically, we don't deal personally with the insurance companies on the testing itself. But one of the things that I think would be really cool is if insurance companies saw preventive care as a great way to, you know, combat patients coming back and, you know, or returning for, you know, with continued health problems, instead of, like we said, with Thomas Edison, and even Ben Franklin said that too, was that if people were just healthier in general, if they took care of themselves, if we could pay for gyms or give even phys ed programs, better programming, if we actually even had more conditioning rather than just, I don't want to say just, because phys ed is a very important part of the school day, but if some phys ed programs were even geared more towards conditioning and wellness, and was paid for, and there was opportunities, you know, that insurances wouldn't deny claims that, like, if you go to a gym, or if somebody recommends, say my cardiologist recommended I go to a gym, we aren't getting that paid for. And I did have a program I ran for years. It was called Growing Stronger, and it was my own program, and that was one of the biggest hurdles I had. I worked with kids with special needs and tried to do exercise conditioning for them, and as an exercise physiologist, unfortunately for all you guys out there who are graduating that, we're not going to ever, I shouldn't say ever, but in the many years that I've been one exercise physiologist, exercise physiologists are not third-party reimbursable through insurance companies. So if you are an exercise physiologist and you feel with all your heart and soul that that patient needs, or that person needs, conditioning, you can plead all you want to the insurance company, but they will not see you. Like, now, physical therapists, they're trained in a different way, and they are, you know, they are third-party reimbursable, meaning they are covered by insurances. Exercise physiologists are not. And you know, sometimes if you are a certified strength training and conditioning, or if you are a certified personal trainer, you may be able to work as, with people who have flex dollars or this and that to get reimbursed, but it's not, exercise physiology and exercise training is not a reimbursable item. And that is a frustration. So, and that's why I'm not doing Growing Stronger anymore, because I really hit a hurdle. And people didn't want to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, I can imagine those expenses can be quite huge just to cover, your time and the expense of the equipment and all of those variables that you just mentioned. Given that you have that constraint, do you refer your clients to CSCS coaches or personal trainers, or what do you look for in people that you want to refer to? Like, what kind of qualities do you want to for the candidates that you refer your patients to?
I think the people that I refer to, I think a lot of the YMCAs are very family oriented. So, and they do tend to hire, before exercise science became a thing, I think it was just somebody who liked going to the gym worked at the gym. But now I think people are a lot more educated. There's a lot more people who are educated that work at the gyms, that most of the gyms and the YMCAs, and or some different types of training program, fitness centers. I do look for someone who may have a better understanding of congenital. It depends on what I'm sending them for. I would never send somebody who has aortic stenosis issues or has had a valve replacement or something along that lines to a heavy duty, high intensity strength training and conditioning person who's going to, just really push them to extremes. I think it has to be the right fit. And I think you probably all know that if you work with a trainer that does not motivate you, you're, no matter how good they are, it's got to be a good fit. And like a perfect example is my nephew, who he's now 26, but when he was, and this is why I started Growing Stronger, was he was 11 years old. He has autism. And my sister called a place out in Doylestown, and she said, could you come to my house and work with them? And they said, oh, yeah. She goes, well, he has autism. Do you think somebody could, oh, yeah, we'll send. This person's really great with kids with autism. Well, this person, obviously, when she walked in my sister's house, had never worked with anybody with autism. And the first thing she said was like, come on, Mikey, we're going to do this. And he looked at her, ran into the bedroom, slammed the door, and, and she didn't know how to handle it. She, so she didn't have any training. She didn't have any understanding of how to work with them. And I think that can sometimes, obviously be not an inhibition, but a problem when working with the patients that we would send to anybody who might, quote unquote, say they know how to work with a certain client. So having some previous training and just a good fit, just like a teacher, just like a doctor, or anybody you ask for help for.
Thank you. That was excellent analysis. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you find it more, interesting, like when you see numbers, like, working with athletes, like abnormal numbers working with athletes, if you have experience working with athletes and you have taken like tests on them, do you find it more interesting and more like amazing compared to like when you do take tests like, on somebody that's out of shape and you see like how out of shape they are?
Well, yes. We are let me just put it this way. side by side with 2 marathon runners. And actually, I take that back. One of my person on my left is a marathon runner. The person on my right is a half marathon runner. One of the cardiologists that we work with, she's a marathon runner. And one of our new hires, she's also she's a long distance runner. And I'm not. But we have a tremendous interest in seeing sometimes, like when we know ahead of time. We also, that's one thing, we always look at their patient history, before they come in, because you don't want to. You don't want to be unfamiliar with a patient before you test them. If they've have a history, a medical history of arrhythmia with exercise, or they've passed out with exercise, you want to know that going into this exercise test. So a lot of times we'll know that this patient coming in has is a long distance runner, is a or pro athlete. And then I will tell you, we've had some pro athletes coming in, and I tested a patient 2 years ago who was 6'8", and I know he got drafted somewhere. So it's really interesting to see what their VO2 levels are, and we know what a high VO2 level is, or at least what a normal is. And when we have someone that hits like the 60 mark, it's pretty exciting to watch. So yeah, I mean, we're human, but we're also exercise physiologists. So seeing a really well-groomed athlete, come in, and whether male or female. And I will tell you, going back to what we started off talking about, was a rehab patient that I worked with the girl, one of the young ladies, 2 of the young ladies that were born with this hypoplastic left heart, and they both were recruited to D1 schools, one for ice hockey and one for lacrosse. And so it's pretty amazing, not just to see athletes come in and do their thing, but to see somebody who was told when they were 2 they probably will never be athletic. That's more exciting to me than anything, to watch these kids grow up and overcome what they were told they would